Content farms, if you've been paying attention to the search industry news, has been a very hot topic in the last couple weeks. I'm very excited about the panel that we've put together here. We were also excited to have Gil Reich from Answers.com join us, but because Answers.com is in the process of going through I believe a purchase, he had to excuse himself at the last minute. So, Gil, sorry about that, and we'll carry on without him. So over the next hour and 15, I expect you're going to hear content farms being criticized. I expect you're going to hear content farms being defended. I think you're going to hear several different angles on content farms, from the big picture about online publishing in general down to some real details about content farms in relation to SEO and how to compete with content farms if you need to do that. But I think one thing that's important to get out of the way up front is that the very definition of a content farm is very subjective. I asked the speakers to give me their definition of content farms as we were preparing for the session, and there was really no consensus on what a content farm is. Some folks talked about it has a lot of ads. Some folks talked about targeting search terms. Some folks talked about how much content gets produced. So there's really no specific definition of what a content farm is. However, when you find articles, on the web like how to make toast and how to boil water, et cetera, it can be pretty easy to throw stones at entire websites and say, that's just a bunch of junk. It doesn't serve, anybody's benefit. But the reality, I think, of content farms is that some of them, they may have real low-quality content, but some also have, some real helpful articles. I know I have personally relied on and successfully relied on articles from some of the sites that get labeled as content farms. So, just to make sure we're all on the same page as we get started, for several months, maybe even for the past year and a half or two, there's been a lot of complaints online among, various bloggers and media, et cetera, that Google search results in particular, the quality has been going down over the past few years. So you've heard a lot about that, people referring to content farms as one of the real problems in terms of impacting search quality. Then more recently, just within the last week or two, Google launched the new change to its algorithm that we originally called the Farmer Update. Google now says it's the Panda Update. Either one, it's the same thing. They say that the change was in the works since January of 2010, and they say that the change they just rolled out a couple weeks ago affects 12% of all search queries. This change, by the way, was rolled out just in the U.S. and will be eventually rolled out elsewhere. So in the immediate analysis after the rollout, there were some clear, quote, losers mentioned, folks like eZine articles. Yahoo's Associated Content was mentioned as a site that suffered a lot of traffic loss, Hub Pages, several others. And then there were other sites that are often mentioned as content farms, the demand media sites like ehow.com, et cetera, that did not apparently suffer a whole lot from Google's update. So that's kind of where things stand today, and that's how I want to get started with our session. And our first speaker is going to be Luke Beatty. Luke is the Vice President and General Manager at Yahoo and oversees Associated Content. So please welcome Luke Beatty.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming out to this session. And I'll tell you about what was formerly called Associated Content and is now the Yahoo Contributor Network. I started the company a little over 6 years ago in my basement. And the premise of the company then, unlike most startups, is still the same as it today, which is create a completely open, democratic platform where anybody can publish audio, video, text, and images. If I can find out that you have a social security number, that you're a real person, that you're not a robot, you can create an account and publish content on what used to be called Associated Content. It's now called the Yahoo Contributor Network. And it's very much an open platform that attracts all kinds of people that want to publish whatever content they want in any format. That has obviously evolved as far as the distribution of it, and that's certainly the focus of this conversation. So I want to talk about who we are, what we do, and sort of dedicate it towards the conversation of how that content gets distributed. And certainly through search for a lot of our contributors is a big distribution point, especially for those without a sort of brand name or a personality. We have about over 400,000 contributors. We usually like to keep about a third of them with active content on the site at a given time. Lots of content gets pushed off the table, on an ongoing basis, depending on the shelf life of it. It's really a place where there's multiple formats. Some people submit solicited content. Some people submit unsolicited content. The solicited content comes to the assignment desk and gets pushed out onto now the Yahoo network. In the past, we pushed all of our content, and the focus of our content was to use associated content to put content on associatedcontent.com. Now the focus of the business is to push content and get crowdsourced content onto the Yahoo network, Shine, Yahoo Sports, News, Finance, all those kinds of properties. And that's really the focus of our business. Some of the more fragmented content that doesn't really have a home still goes on to associatedcontent.com. Certainly the question of the moment is, how did it affect associatedcontent.com's referrals? We generally get a pretty significant amount of our traffic through search, and we still will. A third of our content is up in the search rankings, 2/3 of it down, more down than up from an aggregate page view standpoint. I would say the algorithm changes have really affected some people in positive ways, really affected some people in negative ways, and a lot of people haven't seen a difference. Some people's content was affected in very different ways, and the results are still very much sort of up and down for people. And when we do our internal queries, it hasn't really stabilized, I don't think. Some interesting points I can definitely say on a quantitative basis would be that it seems like the algorithm was changed on an asset-by-asset basis. It wasn't changed on a property basis where there was a huge cram down to all the content that was on any given site. The crowdsourced content that is our premium content that ends up on the Yahoo properties seems to be up and doing really well. And all we ask for is that people take a democratic view towards our content, and we're happy to see that over 90% of our content is still indexed on Google, regardless of where it actually has gone up or down. These are the questions that we're asking as it relates to the algorithm change. What do the contributors think? We're trying to enable Yahoo users to be published on the web. So we're trying to, as we have since 6 years ago, when we had 5 contributors, 3 of them from the Rocky Mountain News and 3 of them from the Denver Post. We had 6 of them. We're all just trying to figure out ways to get them distribution. So that game will always be going on. It will continue to go on. We're probably really good at SEO because we have 400,000 people that can figure out how to write stuff to get on the search engines if that's what they want. Not to a whole lot different than something like eBay. People who are really good at eBay get really good at using eBay. What's the overall impact on Yahoo traffic to the algorithm change? Yahoo traffic is up as a company. Things like Yahoo Answers, other properties that are also crowdsourced are by and large up. So that's a good thing. How does this affect quality? I think it puts more pressure on the contributors to create higher quality content. Obviously, the definition of quality is in the eyes of the beholder and is different for every single type of content and for every single audience person. But it's going to improve quality if indeed Google is good at defining quality. I would say the jury's still out on whether or not they did a good job at ranking which of our content that comes through the Yahoo Contributor Network is higher quality than others. I don't think that we can make that call yet, but I know that if anybody that does a good job at ranking our content and surfacing what's best is something that we support. What's the impact on marketers? Well, a lot of people that advertise on YCN content throughout the Yahoo network are certainly interested in search referral traffic. They're also interested in front door traffic. Obviously, Yahoo does a very good job with front pages and things like that. So it does impact them on potential inventory for search referrals. Those are the things that we're really concerned with. I've got 5 minutes, and I just want to sort of just take a couple minutes to sort of cruise through the evolution of how we've evolved from a distribution standpoint. In 2005, it was all about creating context. I have a search background, creating context for advertising. We wanted to make sure that we were constantly building inventory in the fragmented long-tail web, content that didn't exist on the web. Our contributors inevitably grabbed our platform and went and created that. And again, it was very democratic and very open, so people that wanted an audience could get it. People that wanted to publish a poem and share it with 3 people could get it. People could try to be a superstar and get their content through associated content and picked up by somebody like a Reuters or whoever wanted to use any of our content. But it was all about publishing on associatedcontent.com. We didn't have a direct sales force. Certainly in my basement, we didn't have any way of monetizing other than using contextual ad servers, AdSense, and the whole train of others that came thereafter. In 2008, we sort of switched models and stopped using really contextual ads as much and started building out what we would call hyper-targeted display, where we had big brand advertisers coming to us. They wanted to get content on topics that didn't exist on the web in a significant amount of volume. So you had somebody like Ace Hardware saying, I want hundreds of articles on drills and drill bits and drill-related content. They can't get that anywhere but from our home improvement contributors, of which there are probably 1,000 or more. So we had the ability to, at scale, create that kind of content. It's not advertorial content. It's totally, it's just crowdsourced content that's really pushed out by people who have some sort of area of expertise or passion point. We got, known for being able to create that inventory, and that's what helped our company become a profitable operation, being able to be nimble like that. Now we're today where you're looking at a situation where the average person consumes 70% of the content they consume in a given day is crowdsourced content. That's a whole new world. That's a lot. 30% of the content's getting created by somebody that they know. So this whole idea of not just focusing on premium content and licensed content for Yahoo became something that was attractive to them, which is to say we got to get in the game where we let our contributors create content on topics that we may not be covering. Right? Yahoo doesn't have the ability to cover high school sports. We do. Yahoo doesn't have the ability to cover the necessarily small events like the small dog shows in different parts of the world. People care about that. So that's why we were onboarded into Yahoo, was to create that. And now we push that onto the Yahoo network, creating assignments for sites like Shine. Halloween content at scale is a good example of that, brand relevant assignments. And what we end up being able to provide is really context and consumer activation. You're starting to see things where we can employ our nearly 500,000 contributors to create things that brands want, big brands. A good example would be getting somebody like Kelly, who is a loyal shopper at Walmart, to get involved in Yahoo in Walmart's conversations in the Yahoo environment. They're basically saying, Walmart is saying, I want premium content advertising, but I also want to get involved, have content and my ads and my presentation layer involved in the conversations that stay-at-home moms are having with one another. And we can create that context at scale for them. Starting to see things like a Moms Like Me program that we launch. I think I don't really chafe at the Content Farm title. If Content Farm is equivalent to creating content at massive scale, then that's exactly what we are. Just like eBay is e-commerce at massive scale, we're sort of similar in that sense. If I can verify who you are, and I can make sure that you didn't steal the content that you have, that it wasn't created by a machine, and a lot of above-table stuff, I can pass it on to editors who will make a decision about whether to publish it or not. So at Yahoo Contributor Network, we're super committed to keeping our platform open, and we're also committed to higher and higher quality so that we can bring crowdsourced voices to Yahoo. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Appreciate that. And next up, we have, get this slide right, we have Tim Reuter, who is the Chief Revenue Officer for PerfectMarket. And Tim actually does not have a PowerPoint presentation, so I don't have to pull anything up at this point. I'll just get out of your way.
All right. Thanks, Matt. And PowerPoint is something that I don't do so well. But I appreciate being here with you guys today because this is a really, really important topic to me. I've spent my whole career in marketing of content for traditional news publishers, beginning with online marketing in 1995 at the Washington Post. And it's important to me because the values that sort of traditional media bring to the table, I think, are important values to maintain and to keep. And, you know, for the moment, the quality of what you get from a lot of these mainstream medias is very high, and yet the economics and the underlying fundamentals have some challenges ahead of them. And I believe that by looking at content farms, we can actually walk away and learn some things that can be applied in the traditional media models. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is content farms and traditional media in sort of that context. But before I get started, I actually want to play an old video clip. And this is a clip from long before many of you maybe even were born or were very young, so you may not recognize it, but 30 years ago on Saturday Night Live, there was a clip that I think is relevant today for both the content, the context, and the search implications. So if you would go ahead and hit play now, Michelle.
Colonel Muammar Gaddafi has been the subject of intense news coverage this week by every major news organization in America.
Can we back it up to 4 minutes and 30 seconds?
The Chicago Tribune spells it until all 12,000 of them are already unemployed again.
Okay, thank you.
Well, this man, Libyan leader Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, has been the subject of intense news coverage this week by every major news organization in America. However, every time his name appears in print, it has a different spelling. The Chicago Tribune spells it K-H-A-D-A-F-Y. The Los Angeles Times spells it K-A-D-A-F-I. Newsweek Magazine, K-A-D-D-A-F-I. Time Magazine, G-A-D-D-A-F-I. The Wall Street Journal, Q-A-D-H-A-F-I. The Washington Post, Q-A-D-D-A-F-I, losing out to the New York Times by a small L. My personal favorite is from the comic book publishers, Gaddafi Duck.
So it's a little bit prescient. 30 years ago, Muammar Gaddafi was an evil dictator, and newspapers, and remember, there was no internet news back then, didn't have a consistent view on what to name this man. Today, Muammar Gaddafi is still an evil dictator, and newspapers still don't have a consistent way to spell his name. So, you know, in this era of the internet, you might think that newspapers would have begun to look at the language that people use and begin to understand that a little bit. And in fact, the connection with SEO on something like this, I think, is really, really obvious. Any of you using your typical keyword tools, whether you're using Google Insights or any of the others, put in a couple of spellings of his name and you'll find out that at least in the United States, the vast, vast majority spell his name in one way, with a G, no H, and 2 Ds. Unfortunately, ABC News did a survey of the coverage of Gaddafi recently, and there's still, in major media outlets, well over 100 different versions of his name being spelled. Now that connection, I think, extends into the connection with content farms. And before I sort of tie it all together, I want to describe sort of 4 attributes when I think of content farms, what they are. One, Luke hit on pretty hardcore, which is content farms have systematic processes, tools, and organizations to write large amounts of content. 1. 2, content farms have data and tools to help them understand what people are interested in i.e., what's the volume of search queries on terms, right? Pretty straightforward stuff. 3, content farms have data that help them understand what kind of commercial demand exists underneath each of those topics. And 4, and I think this is sort of an important one, content farms, at least in the ones that we've seen public filings on, in their accounting, they amortize the cost of that content creation over a long period of time. So I think Demand Media has described a 5-year period that they amortize the cost of that content against, which plays back into some of the ways you think about content. So let me go through each of those 4 things and talk about traditional news media, news outlets, and how that works. So first, the whole idea of large-scale production and editorial systems. That's something newspapers have been doing for generations. They've learned how to do that reasonably well, producing hundreds of stories and in some case more each day. My company, PerfectMarket, we work with a small, sort of a subset of news publishers, and we see over 5,000 unique articles written each day. And I believe that the quality of those is generally very, very high because it's going through a very traditional kind of process. Second, on the consumer demand front, things begin to diverge a little bit. Certainly, traditional publishers take reader interest into account, but that reader interest is defined very, very broadly and is based not just on what readers want to know today, but what smart people who are engaged in the world think those readers would like to know or what would be important to know. That kind of an approach really leads to the sort of investigative journalism into things like the city council in Bell, California, which has had some pretty amazing scandals. But it also extends into service journalism and things like reviews and listings and that kind of thing. This idea of what people are searching for, however, is almost entirely absent from the real deep process of news gathering and reporting. And if anything, that sort of finds its way into the organizations in the province of an in-house SEO, but isn't yet baked into the DNA of those organizations. In fact, with this Gaddafi case, I was looking at a lot of sites and how they present this. And, most news sites have these topic pages. Everybody here is familiar with topic pages. And I found one very major publisher, and it had Muammar Gaddafi topic page that was spelled one way, and yet every story that was written had it spelled in an entirely different way. And, of course, the impact of that as you're trying to optimize for the most traffic or the most relevance is pretty dramatic. It points to really an organizational disconnect, I think, that happens on these news sites between the creation of unique content and the production and optimization of that content, sort of between the print and the online. And it's the kind of thing that I don't think happens in the traditional content farms as you think about them. The way in which taxonomies are developed and the way in which content is categorized. That third attribute, the attribute of commercial demand, is also a really important one in the mix here. And that attribute really is something that when you think about content farms, they're measuring and extracting value from the commercial demand at a very atomic level, at the level of the individual article. And yet newspapers, particularly newspapers, but also broadcast news and other mainstream media, tend to monetize and think about that demand not at the atomic level of the content, but at an aggregated level. So they think in terms of sections, right? So we're going to sell health advertising to the health section and movie advertising in the entertainment section, and the main news section, which is sort of everything of national and some local importance, gets an odd mix of furniture dealers and whatever. That's translated online into these online organizations into display advertising sales that, again, is very broadly targeted and not sort of reaching into the tail. And so mainstream news sites really have to learn to reconcile that difference between atomic content, where people are coming directly into articles from search engines and deep links, and the way in which they're packaging and selling up today. Content farms, I think that they understand that quite well, even if they do take it to an extreme at times, like how to boil water. And the final point here is really about the economics of content farms. So I mentioned the way in which content costs are amortized over a 5-year period. What that does within an organization is it has them tending to think about the long-term durability of content. And that durability of content is something that's foreign to a lot of traditional news organizations. The newsrooms operate on adrenaline. They operate on what is typically known in the business as the daily miracle, right? It's a miracle that a newspaper gets out, that it gets manufactured, that it gets distributed, that it gets dropped on somebody's front stoop. And when it's out, it's done, and it's on to the next miracle. So the content is not really developed or considered in a longer-term fashion, and that's something I think that is really, really important, because much of the content in these news sites actually has the kind of durability that can be very, very long-lasting. And I've seen good examples of that when the right sort of resources and thoughts are put into organizing that content. Now, the knock against these content farms, of course, and at the moment I think it is rightfully placed, is that the quality can be very, very low and thin and so on. The market pressure, though, that's happening is forcing a change on that. That market pressure was here before a week and a half ago, and it'll continue long after, but I think that the recent Panda Farmer update certainly puts a lot more impetus on the need for quality coming out of anybody that's producing quality, content farmers included. And certainly what we've seen is that most of the mainstream press was not affected in any kind of a dramatic way by that update. So these content farms are not going to sit still. They're going to continue to improve their quality over time, put more quality controls in place. And so, today, the news that's published by brands like New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, that content and the quality that you get when you go to these sites and you read these stories online is currently being essentially subsidized by the offline versions of those products. That subsidization of quality today gives those publishers a dramatic advantage at the moment. But it's an advantage that's going to narrow, and it's going to narrow not only because of the fundamentals of print readership and traditional broadcast news viewership changing, but it's also going to change because the competitive landscape is changing and the quality of content coming out of places like Associated Content or Yahoo Publisher Network and demand media is going to change. And so the time is right now, I believe, for publishers, traditional publishers, to actually learn some of these lessons from content farms while trying to maintain and keep the kind of values that they've used in the production of their content over generations. And again, those lessons have to do with understanding and leveraging consumer interest, not just at a broad level, but at a very, very granular level. Capturing better revenue streams that come with more granular targeting and thinking about your content in a more granular way. Understanding the durability of content that's being produced, whether it's content about how to ship wine or what is the quality of bottled water. And then finally, taking full advantage of the moment in time that these publishers have today in order to put these things in place before their competitors get better and better, and someday, we lose what we have from those mainstream media publishers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, next up, and there we go. Whoops. Okay, so next up we have Byrne Hobart, who is the Marketing Strategy Director for Blue Fountain Media.
Hey everyone, I'm Byrne at Blue Fountain Media. You can learn more about us at bluefountainmedia.com or just Google website design company and click on the first organic result. That'll be us. Yes. I'm going to talk a little about the economics of content farms. I think the big question we all want answered is, why did someone get paid $15 to write an article on how to pour water into a glass cup? It really is out there. You really can Google it and find that article. And when you do, don't miss the related articles feature, which includes articles like how to pour water out of a pitcher and how to pour juice out of a pitcher. So if we ask how did we get here, we have to ask where we started. And I think if you're talking about content farms, you have to talk about other forms of media in kind of in the same context. So the old way of doing things was what I could call supply media, where you have a content creator, maybe they're an artist, a musician, a journalist, or whatever. They create content, and then they find an audience for it, and they find a way to monetize that audience. So the journalist creates content. They create news. They turn that into a newspaper. The newspaper can have ads in it, and the ads subsidize that journalistic process. It's a great system if you are a content creator, if you like writing good stuff or you like writing good music. It's great to have this system where you create it and then other people consume it. But that model is only tenable when it's hard to figure out what people want. And over time, the cost of finding out what people want has gone down. So we have a new model, which, not to name names, but you could call it demand media. Demand media, this model is, since you know exactly what people want, you can give them exactly what they want. So we've been doing this in the media business since forever. That's what pop music is. That's what reality TV is. But now we know exactly what people are thinking, because when they think something, they type it into Google. And when they type it into Google, Google tells us roughly what they've typed. So if you are if you want to create this kind of content, you can use Google search queries. You can buy data from ISPs. You can have a bunch of registered domains that you don't really use, but you can still see what people type into those domains and then what ads they click on. That gives you the information you need to find out where there's demand for content. Then you monetize the content by selling ads that solve the exact problem that someone has, assuming that they type in a particular question into Google. So in that how to pour a glass of water article, they might monetize it by selling you glasses in case you are poor at pouring water into a glass and you knock the glass over and need to replace it. And that does work. It works extremely well. Demand media does file with the SEC, so you can find out how much money they're making in a lot of different ways. And one of the things they tell you is how much they're making per page view. Right now, the number is $13.45 per 1,000 page views. That's actually up 26% from last year. So you might think from that the quality of the content is getting better, but there's another possibility, which is that demand media knows that, and any content farm knows this, when someone is looking at an article and the article purports to answer a question they have or solve a problem they have, worst case scenario from a revenue perspective is that it actually does that. It solves the problem they have, they just close the article and they're done. What you actually want is an article that kind of gets there, that sort of illustrates that, yeah, this is a tricky problem. It would be very nice if you didn't have this problem. But then it's plastered with ads that actually do tell you how to solve the problem and tell you that it will cost you a little money, but it'll actually get done. So this does have amazing economies of scale. Once you own these old established domain names, once you buy all the data, once you set up your system for paying freelancers to write content, the cost of an incremental article is quite low. So your incentive is not to care about the quality of that article or care about how well focused it is. It's just to crank out this new content and amortize the cost of building this system in the first place. It's a great monetization strategy for old domains. So if you've had a site for a while, it's been accumulating links, accumulating trust, but you haven't done much with it, this is a great way to start monetizing it. It's also a great way to monetize the celebrity equivalent of that. So one of the things that Demand Media has done, which is quite clever, is that they are rolling out different sites based on a particular celebrity. So they have a Rachel Ray site just announced, a Lance Armstrong site's been around for a while, a Tyra Banks site. And these are sites where the celebrity anchors the site. The celebrity is why the site gets lots of links and trust and attention. And then the monetization is that they create all this long-tail content that's on the same subject and that's plastered with ads. So I guess if I had to make a prediction here, you have the food vertical, you have the health vertical, you have the beauty vertical. The big one that's missing in terms of clicks that are easy to monetize is finance. So don't be surprised if Demand Media rolls out a finance site that's anchored by some celebrity like Sue Zorman or whoever in the next year or two. That's the big one they haven't quite targeted yet. So who wins from this change in the economics of content? That's right. Anyone with more money than time comes out ahead here. If your old strategy was, I'm going to get to know the influencers, I'm going to convince them that I'm a good person, they should link to me, and that's how I'm going to rank, the returns on that have gone down because the rewards of ranking it's gotten harder to rank because you have eHow and Associated Content and Suite 101 and whoever outranking you. Online absentee landlords are also going to win. So if you have a nice site, it's been around for a while, you can't really invest the resources to make it great, you can use a content farming strategy to make that happen. That's something that the San Francisco Chronicle site is doing with Business Insider. It's something that other sites are doing. It's something that eHow sort of did because they were a site with a similar strategy before Demand Media purchased them, and now they are that site with that strategy executed extremely well. Another big winner here, non-traditional employees. A lot of the people who work on these content farms are people, not quite traditional employees. Actually, a lot of them are stay-at-home moms. And it's interesting when you think about that if you're a stay-at-home mom, you probably can't work a 9-to-5 job. Obviously, you're at home. But you might have 40 hours a week of unstructured downtime. The problem is some of it's probably at 10 p.m. or 2 a.m. or whenever. But if the way that you make money is you write an article for 20 or 30 minutes and you get $15, that's a good deal for you. If the market value of your time is basically zero, then it doesn't take much for someone else to be the high bidder. Another winner here is searchers who are looking for long-tail terms. These are sufficiently long-tail terms that there's either no good content or no content that's good enough to rank. So if I'm searching for a hyper-targeted term like good places to get dinner around the San Jose Marriott, that content is out there, I'm sure. I could spend 30 minutes searching for slightly less targeted terms and I could find it. But if someone at a content farm realized that there was demand for this, they could just pay someone $15 to do that search or that set of searches for me, do it once, find the right information, then give me a list of a couple places I could go out to eat. That's a useful piece of content. It only exists because there's demand for it, and it only exists in a content farm world. One last set of winners are the shareholders. If you own stock in Demand Media, good for you. It seems to be doing well since the IPO. Companies like AOL, Yahoo now, they are probably going to economically benefit from this because there is a big opportunity here. So who are the losers? Anyone with more time than money. So again, if your strategy is create the content, rank well, and then you win, now that's harder to do. And if you don't have the budget to pay for the AdSense traffic, you just lose that traffic. Traditional media, they're starting to lose because the ad budgets that would have gone to them are now going to other sites, and the credibility of media and content in general slightly declines. Active bloggers lose. It used to be a great blogging strategy to write long-tail content and rank for it. That's harder than it used to be. If you're trying to get into the SEO industry, you might lose because one of the easy entry-level jobs was just crank out low-quality content and learn about the industry because you're learning about a campaign in context, and then gradually move up the food chain in terms of the value of the content and the value of the service that you provide. And searchers looking for higher traffic terms will probably lose because Google can't quite distinguish yet between a good site with good content and a really well-optimized site with kind of mediocre content. So as these sites are able to accumulate more links, they will end up outranking people who are otherwise much more qualified to write about that topic. And of course, the SEOs, we do tend to lose a little bit. We are finally old media. The good old days, the golden age, it's kind of over. We do have to change the way we operate. And one way to think about this is that it is a bit of an industrial revolution. We're not creating content farms, we're building content factories where you can easily mass produce something, but you've disaggregated the content creation process from owning the site and from creating a marketing campaign. In fact, the job that got me into the industry relied on the non-existence of content farms. I got into the industry writing this low-quality content. That job doesn't exist anymore, or it doesn't exist in the same form because you can't promote someone because they wrote a piece on Demand Media and that piece generated a lot of AdSense traffic for your site. You can't find out who wrote that article and then ask them to write your landing page. It just doesn't happen anymore. And the whole system is just getting more and more efficient. We're kind of in the same scenario as the Red Queen and Alice in Wonderland. We have to keep moving faster and faster and faster just to stay in place. It's a giant labor arbitrage, I think the biggest one since people discovered that you could outsource manufacturing to China, because there's literally so much unexploited time from people whose market value is really low, and you have a lot of content farms that are bidding for that time. You also have sites like eBay and Etsy that are effectively bidding for their time and not paying them great wages, but paying them better than they can get anywhere else and making money on the difference between the cost of that labor and the value. So we in the SEO industry, we have leapt into action. We have had a rapid response here. We've done everything from complaining to the media to complaining to Google, complaining on our blogs, even complaining to our Twitter followers. But somehow it hasn't quite worked. I'm not sure why. There are some better options, though, and I'd like to talk about a few of them. One is that you can invest more time in writing high-quality content. And in a world where it is really cheap and easy to produce low-quality content, quality is a relatively better deal. You can also sneak into the SERP through social media. Google is using social media sharing as a ranking indicator. Bing is using Facebook likes as a ranking indicator. So if you write some content and get your immediate circle of friends to read it and like it and share it, it's more likely that people in their circle of friends will see it. So you get to kind of recreate your own trust factor within a particular social group. You can also dust off your email, newsletter, stuff some of that high-quality content into it, tell people to share it and forward it, and if you can't get into the SERP, you can at least get into the inbox. Last thing to consider here is that a lot of these content farms are basically a new iteration on the old made-for-AdSense idea. It used to be that you could scrape together a site and have no valuable content, just put AdSense on it. The AdSense was by far the most interesting part of the page, so that's what made the money. These sites are a cut above that. It's content that is just good enough to rank, but other than that, not so great. But that means that you can buy that traffic. Since there are so many of these pages being created, the traffic is fairly cheap. It's also very well targeted. So you can write your copy in your AdSense ads, and you can write your copy on the landing page targeting someone who just read a frustratingly vague and poorly researched article. That article is written by an amateur. This site is run by a professional. That article says this is a hard problem to solve. This site says here's how to solve it, 3 easy payments, and you're done. That is a convincing argument, and the nice thing about all of this is that in the end, Google is going to figure out how to rank high-quality and low-quality content effectively. So if they look at a site that has high-quality content, it's getting shared frequently, people are signing up for the newsletter, they're sharing it on Twitter and Facebook, that's a site that Google wants to rank well in the long term. So in the short term, you're adapting to this world where bad content or mediocre content can be made cheaply. You're adapting to it, but in the long term, you're actually optimizing for the search engine of the future, which is coming at some point. Google will figure it out, and when they do, this is how you can be ready. Thank you.
Thanks, Byrne. Appreciate it. Okay, so we have one more speaker to go, and I think I failed to mention early on that if you have questions, we have the website URL up there. You just go in and type, and we have Max Thomas. Where are you, Max? Where'd you go? Right in the back there in the middle, who is going to be moderating the Q&A. So if you don't have access to a laptop or whatever, you can bring a question to Max, and we'll be doing, still have plenty of time for Q&A after our next speaker, and that is Matthew Brown, and Matthew is the founder of a company called AudienceWise. So here is Matthew Brown.
Hi there. I actually don't want your content farm to burn in hell. This is actually a response to Farmville, but I found it amusing in this situation. So we know Google calls this the Panda update internally. We know they didn't call it the Farmer update. They're not specifically targeting content farms. Who here thinks that this is the biggest algorithm update that Google has had since Florida? Barely anybody. Okay, I think it might be when all is said and done. But the point of the Panda update and why they call it the Panda update is they weren't specifically targeting content farms. That Google doesn't care whether or not you have 10 journalists that you pay $1 million or 1 million journalists you pay $10. They're looking for low quality and thin content across any kind of network. So we saw e-commerce sites get hit. We saw scraper sites get hit. We saw comparison shopping sites get hit, all across the board. So it didn't really matter what site type you were, at least as of yet. It really mattered that you had an overabundance of thin or low-quality content on the site. So backing up a little bit to what we were talking about a little earlier, domain authority, how content farms got started. Some of it is, domain authority. Back then, if you had a trusted domain, and this is like the 2005 to 2008 range, you had a trusted domain, you could launch pages that basically, based on your domain authority, you could get ranked for long-tail keyword terms. And this is where, a lot of the sites that launch millions of pages of long-tail rankings that add up to a lot of page views, this is how they got their start in terms of how content farms got started. So before I launched AudienceWise, I was director of search strategy at New York Times Company, which includes About.com. And one of the things that we did at NY Times was launch topics pages. So anything that we wrote about, where, who, why, when, we would come up with, okay, you can browse to those topics and get to pages. Some of them were great. So some of our country pages or some of our news pages had video and multimedia, and they had all these great data and interactive graphics. And then some of them looked like this. I mean, it's just a little bit of ads. There's a link. It's, we don't have any content on this. Well, guess what? This would rank for Apple Valley Bank and Trust Company just as well as we'd rank for Egypt, or just as well as we'd rank for, Obama. These things happened. These things did happen by virtue of domain authority. So that's kind of what Google's correcting for in this update. So what everybody's doing right now is guessing. So we're all kind of doing, as SEOs, educated guesses on what's going on. People are collecting data, trying to figure out, what got people into this penalty. It's not really a penalty. It's more of a filter, or it's more of a weight that's being placed on your domain. A couple things that I'm looking at, I can't say in my opinion on all slides, but a couple things I'm looking at is, it looks like domains we know that got hit across the board on a lot of keywords. And it's not like you could look at and say, okay, they got hit equally on their thin content and low quality content as they did on their strong pages. Sites like Mahalo and some of the other sites that we looked at, they got hit on their big terms that they had a lot of content on and had links to. So they went down as a percentage there. So it looks like if you've got enough of this farmer factor or farmer smell on your site, it can pull down pages that aren't necessarily low quality content or thin content. It can pull your site down, site-wide on some of your stronger terms. So it looks like it's kind of page-based, but can have, as Google has said, a site-wide component if you're that bad. So some signals you want to look at that it looks like are common to the sites that got hit. The big sites that have a ton of pages, millions and millions of pages, or hundreds of thousands of pages, and too many of those are low quality, that ratio is too far out of whack. Some of the article directories and some of the e-commerce, big product listing sites, that ratio gets out of whack. It looks like you got hit. And that's in like the 50 to 70% range. These are the sites that relied on domain authority to launch all these different low-level pages. Smaller sites that we've seen get hit, although they don't have a ton of pages, too many of those pages, if they have 1,000 pages, I've taken a look at them, and about 800 of them are really thin content, or 700, or something that's way out of whack. So even though they're not huge sites, that ratio, again, is out of whack. And so that's another thing to look at. And another data point that's coming out that looks like it's a possible signal, and I think Tom Critchlow at Distilled was the first person that I saw write about this, is sites that got hit in less of that penalty, maybe the 30 to 40% range across their big keywords. They tended to have ads loaded up on the page. So they'd have ads that were above the fold of the content, or they're in line above where the content started, or there were way too many ad blocks. The ad to content ratio was way out of whack. And so that's another thing to look at in page templates is if your ads are really in the way of your content or outweighing your content, it appears that that's a commonality and a common factor on the sites that got hit. So something that you can look at in terms of the survivors, people were talking a lot about eHow or sites like Huffington Post. And a site like Huffington Post will target all these keyword variations. So they'll have these aggregator pages like, Steve Jobs email, Steve Jobs Google email, Steve Jobs leaves the Apple board. And that's kind of similar to what we're talking about in terms of targeting as many long-tail keyword phrases as possible. They didn't get hit. The common factor on the sites that didn't get hit that have these kind of pages looks like it's brand signals, or they have enough juice to escape what might be, the farmer factor in this case. Whereas a site like Hub Pages, they're doing the same thing. Logic and brain teasers and puzzles, and all these different keyword variations. They don't have a lot of those same signals. They don't have a lot of that juice that might carry you over as what Google defines as a brand. So you're looking for that elusive brand smell. You're looking for things like Google News inclusion, which is more important than ever. If there's going to be a really strong signal that you're part of an ecosystem that deserves to kind of get a pass on this update, Google News inclusion, Yahoo, you're in Yahoo News, you're in blog search engines, you're getting articles in on Reddit and Dig and some of the social media sites. Like you look and smell like a brand to Google. Your deeper content, not just your homepage, but your deeper content is getting tweets and shares and likes. These are all signals Google's going to use to say, okay, it's not just a scraper site. It's not just an article directory site. This isn't just repurposed e-commerce stuff. Another thing you want to look at is, are all your links concentrated on like the homepage and index page of your site? Do you have any deeper links to your content? If you're launching 1 million pages, but only the top 5, 10, or 100 pages actually have links on your site, that doesn't look like a brand. A site like Huffington Post is going to have links to a lot of deep content on their site. So now, the question is, how do you get out of it? Or how do you avoid getting into this? And I think that one of the things you have to look at from a top level is, Byrne mentioned this, and Vanessa Fox wrote an article on Search Engine Land. You're probably not getting out of this by whining to Google. You're probably not going to get out of it by posting in their webmaster help thread that your site is great and it was unfairly targeted. You got caught in the algorithmic filter. It's probably time to cowboy or cowgirl up and really look at your site and figure out how you got caught up in this algorithmic penalty. So if you're looking at your site and you find pages like this where there's no content, there's an ad, and this isn't even particularly loaded up with ads, that's probably something you want to correct on your page templates. And you might have pages floating around your site that look like this that you weren't quite aware of. By contrast, everybody was looking at why didn't eHow get hit? eHow looks totally different. I mean, there's not a ton of ads above the fold. In fact, there's no ads on this page above the fold. They're all to the right. The content's up and above the fold. There's plenty of content. I mean, eHow kind of got unfairly swept up into this, well, it's just like Mahalo, or it's just like some of these article directories filter, when really, if you want to look at what they're doing right, you might want to change some of your page templates to this model rather than to the ads above the fold model. So other things you can do to clean your site up. If you have pages that you can just out and out remove that have no content or thin content, get rid of them if you can. If you can't because, they're part of your site architecture that link to other deeper content, try to use strategies like using the no index follow tag, which tells the engines, go ahead and crawl to this page and crawl the links off this page. Don't index this page. That might work if you have like a middle layer of your site that you can't just remove. And then build out those brand signals to deeper content. Try to get shares and tweets and likes and at least build up some link popularity to deep content so it's not just concentrated on your most popular pages or your index pages. Small publishers are kind of, they're nimble enough that they can do some things that the bigger publishers can't. If you have a domain portfolio where you can launch new channels in like travel or media or entertainment, you might be better off and you might be able to outmaneuver a big site that's loaded down as one big content landfill. Like eHow has, the broadest range of topics possible, and so does some of these other sites. Some of the domainers that I know are like, great, now this is wide open in this particular niche. I've got good domains here. I can launch, 1,000 or 10,000 pages of content and capture some of the vacuum that's been left in the search engine results. If you're a bigger publisher, now's the time to tighten your editorial focus. Now's the time to make sure that contributors to your network aren't submitting 100-word articles or aren't putting up keyword targets that don't actually have content and some of these other things. You want to definitely scale your promotion to your content creation. So if you're a bigger publisher, I would rather have a new army of social media practitioners and SEOs and people that are really good at driving promotion than I would a new army of content contributors where you can't build up attention to what you're creating. So just as kind of an example of, this is where a lot of us are seeing this backfill, where there's vacuum in the SERPs, where all the sites that have kind of moved down, there's this weird, the sites that are moving up aren't that great. What's going on? So something like How to Tie a Lure, which is, it's long tail. It's got like 1,500, between 500 and 1,000 queries a month, according to Google. And, it's the kind of thing that you'd target if you were a content farm. Well, now you can look here, and the number one result into the videos is a site called Idea22, whereas they've moved eHow down, they've moved some of the other demand media sites down, About.com's not in there, some of these new sites are coming up. And it's a good site. It's not optimized. This page isn't optimized. It's got a terrible title tag. It doesn't have any video transcripting. It's not what you'd consider an optimized page, but it does have video on it. It does have content, and it ranks number one below the video one box. So it's got to be doing something right. But if you take a look at it in a little more depth, Open Site Explorer says it's got no external links at all. The only two links to it are from its own site, and Yahoo Site Explorer says it's got one internal or external link from enjoyfishing.info. So what you might be seeing coming up is the top 5 results are these sites that look like they're, they don't have a ton of link popularity. They don't have a ton of signals or brand signals, and this is opportunity. You might want to go back and look at keyword research and some of the stuff you're doing, whether you're big or small, and say, wow, there's a new opportunity here where some of the sites that are being ranked are hanging on by a thread. This might be the first result where, I feel sorry for the dude who has the fishing video, but where somebody builds enough links to outrank him before my presentation's over, which would kind of suck for him. But if you look at your niche and you see some of these sites coming in as backfill, now's the time to go get them while, the bigger brands are catching up with their content machines and smaller publishers are starting to launch new channels and domains. So good luck out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Okay, so we have looks like about 17 minutes or so, if my iPhone is correctly timed, for Q&A. And oh gosh, let me see if I can remember how to do this to find my Q&A section. Max, I assume we were getting questions coming in. So if I can get rid of that and click right there. refresh. Okay, so it looks like we do have some questions. Thank you all for great presentations. I guess I want to ask, I'm going to go first because I'm running the show. So, for years, SEOs, we've all been telling our clients to look at our analytics and look at the terms that drive traffic to our site and to create content to those terms. There's nothing wrong with that at this point, right? Is there? Is the problem with the quote content farms, is it just in the execution of that idea? I have stumped.
All right, I'll start with that. The problem I see with has to do with the actual quality of the content. So yeah, it is an execution. It's an execution problem against content that is, really, really lightweight. Now, some subjects may warrant lightweight content, but you want a little more than a lot of what we're seeing.
I don't think it's really our job to make sure that the average content quality is good enough for Google users. Our job, if we're doing marketing, is to promote our client sites or promote our own sites. And if we don't harm the search experience, I'm not sure that we should invest more effort than is really necessary in writing content that ranks well.
I would just add to it. I think it's just an overreach. I don't have any problems with, sites launching, how to pour a glass of water, how to make toast. It's just that, that page view kind of meth addiction where it's like, well, we can launch 100,000 pages and still get, 1 to 10 hits off of it. And that adds up to significant traffic without actual legitimate content. I think that's where the overreach happened, and I think that's where Google's made a correction on this.
Okay, so some of the questions that came in. Justin asked, what are some of the things, a lot of these sites are crowdsourced content, and so Luke, this may be specific to you if you want to address it, and some of the other panelists as well. If we're using crowdsourced content, what are some of the things we should avoid?
Well, I think if you're using crowdsourced content on a small or medium-sized site, I think you need to avoid people that are, doing the standard, sort of kind of garbage SEO tactics, because you don't need them to come into your domain and hurt your user base's perspective of what you're doing. Nor, if you're in the search traffic business, you need them making it so that you get dinged by their content. I think engagement of users is the purpose of crowdsourced content. It's not to drive traffic, and I think that's the fundamental difference. If you're a publisher and you want to get crowdsourced content, it shouldn't be to create inventory. It should be to add perspective and add depth to your site. So I think if you have that perspective, you can, from an editorial perspective, decide what should and shouldn't be there. But if you're using crowdsourced content to just create pages, that's where you're begging for problems in your decision making from that point on, I think.
There's a question for Matthew. There it is. It says, Matthew, you mentioned video. Are there other content suggestions recommended to help with top rankings?
I like video best. I think that site that I showed as an example, it doesn't really have any content on it other than that video, and I think that people are making this big launch into video as a content type on there. Other things that can get you in the Google One Box I think are good, properly optimized images. If you can get news inclusion, if you can't get into news, if you can at least get into Google blog search, all of these are signals that could, get you up and not only visible in that particular ranking, but, kind of indicate to Google that people are searching on your content other than just, you have a title tag and you have a headline, you have a URL that targets a keyword phrase. Google can see that you have other content and other content types that people are looking for. So I like images and video a lot. I like social signals a lot to build, any tweets or likes or any kind of shares that you can get on your content, I think are good signals now to indicate that you're not just targeting, a random keyword phrase.
This is a question. I'm going to ask a related question to what's here. What's Google's role in all this? People write content to what they find on Google Trends. We had a couple speakers talk about made-for AdSense sites, people trying to monetize their sites via AdSense. So is Google, to some degree, trying to clean up a mess that they have in part created?
Sure. They've built an algorithm that's great at figuring out what's relevant and what's useful and who's trustworthy and who's not, but it's not a perfect algorithm, and there's always going to be an arms race between people liking the results and people exploiting the way those results are created. But one of the things that Google pointed out when they wrote about their Farmer update was that in quantitative terms, the search quality experience hasn't been degraded, even though people are complaining about it, that people are not doing multiple searches instead of just one search, and they're not spending a whole lot of time looking at the SERP versus clicking on the number one result. They're not bouncing from pages as much. So as far as Google is concerned, this may be algorithmically a better deal. It may be a better deal to have content farms than to not have them. The other thing you have to look at is that we are not typical internet users. The fact that we know the difference between the internet and Google and Internet Explorer probably puts us in the top 10%. So you can't think of your own experience as in any way relevant to the average experience of the average person. They are just overwhelmed and bewildered by all the content that's hitting them when they go online, and the fact that eHow answers their question is probably a good thing.
My answer to that question would be, what role do they play? They play the role of offense and defense. So they're creating a search engine, and then they're also creating monetization at the other end and trying to figure out how to connect the two. So, it's important to think about that. I also think that they're also, as everybody in this room knows, they're creating a game, and they've created a big game, and people play it all day long. And there've been however many hundreds of algorithm changes, and they will continue to change that game. And the content creators and the publishers will continue to, if they're interested in getting Google referrals, continue to play that game. And I think it's just important, when you think about, to answer the question about what their role is to be, doing what's best for their business, and that may or may not be what's best for competition or what's best for you as a publisher. But they've basically put a game out there, and there's so much game theory involved in what's going on. It's always a moving target.
I think you hit on something there that, it's their business model is going to rely on user trust and their brand. And so, the money coming in from some of these sites that have lots of ads and have, very little content, that's got to reach a point at Google where they understand that, once they start sacrificing user trust and their brand, that's worth way, way more than what they're taking in from these sites. So they may even look at it like, okay, ad revenue is going to go down for a little while, but that's better than, not having users have this brand negativity that can be used to persist, that we have a lot of spam in the results and things like that. So they may be playing long ball on that part of it.
There's a question asking about quality signals, and I want to kind of spin that into a related question. The interviews that Google has done, Matt Cutts and Amit Singhal, since the update rolled out, they have referred to this group of quality raters that they use, regular Joes that review search results, and they answer a specific set of questions. Would you be, trust this site with your credit card? Does this, things like that. One of the things that I don't think has been covered, and if somebody here wants to cover it, is that I've noticed a lot of these questions relate to the design of the website. And I guess, Matthew, you talked about that to some degree with the eHow example. Is that more of a factor then at this point, having something that people, whether or not the quality itself is great, at least it looks nice?
I think it is, and I think that, Matt Cutts used to say, when he was asked, are you looking at data points like bounce rate off the SERPs and things like that, or, users who click the back button, he used to say that's too noisy a data point. It can be gamed too easily. We don't look at it. I don't think he said that for a long time, and I think they've got some very smart people working on those user signals. They may have been able to extract some stuff out of that noise now that's matching what people have responded to those surveys and said, I don't trust the site, or it looks spammy, or I wouldn't give them my credit card. So now they're starting to match up these user signals with what they already know, and so they launched the Chrome toolbar extension that says report this site or block this site, and they're going to start looking at those signals now. So if you thought this algorithm update was starting to get severe, I think it's only going to get worse as it goes on for sites that have these poor user signals, or these poor, Google's getting these various poor quality feedback on their site. So design is one of them. I mean, I think eHow's a good example. eHow didn't get slammed, at least not too hard. Maybe they got slammed in some categories, but their site design is fairly clean, even if people look at their content and think it's kind of shaky.
Melissa has a question for Luke. Wants to know, what is the Yahoo Contributor Network's strategy moving forward?
So our goal in general is to surface the best quality crowdsourced content and push it on to the Yahoo owned and operated properties. That means Yahoo editorial people sitting down and taking unsolicited content that comes in their category and looking at it and deciding whether or not they are interested in publishing it on their sites, and then also proactively going out there and creating content. We're not trying to create competitive content with all the premium professionally generated content that's on Yahoo. What we're trying to do is cover content topics and areas that aren't covered. So examples would be cover high school sports. We have the ability to cover high school sports. We have the ability to send somebody to every single game on Friday night in the state of Texas. Yahoo Sports doesn't have the ability to do that with its current sort of staffing and editorial plan. Not many people do. Same thing with finance. We don't cover personal finance, but we're going to start covering personal finance. We're going to have different people from different perspectives put crowdsourced content on Yahoo Finance. It's new content on new categories, and so, or new content in existing O&O properties. So that's really the focus of all of our time and energy. We're launching it internationally. That's a big deal. We're getting ready to push out a Yahoo Contributor Network in every country over the next year and a half.
Several SEO questions, and we're down to our last couple minutes, so we'll see how quick we can get through these. If you have been hit by the update and can remove low-quality pages, what's the best way to go about it? Should you remove the suspect content all at once or phase it out? Matthew?
I mean, I'd get rid of it all at once. I don't think that, if you've been hit by the penalty, I'm not sure that you have a hope of recovering whatever long-tail keyword traffic that was there, unless you can build out content on those pages. So, the first two things I'd look at is removing the pages. Either if there's a redirect target, you can redirect them to that makes sense. Do that. Otherwise, just get them out of your sitemaps and 404 them or 410 them. I'd also look at your page templates. So the two things I'd look at first in trying to get out of it was getting rid of those pages and cleaning up page templates that have lots of ad noise or lots of ads and links and very thin content. I'd start there, and then you're forced with, how can we add content to the thin pages that we have on the site? Nobody knows yet how long it takes from doing stuff to, hey, our traffic's back. So that's, I think we're going to start seeing data come out on, we were in there, we did this, we got out of there, it took this long. So that's the kind of data that we're looking at, that I'm waiting for.
Keith asks, these content farm sites rank well even for some head terms, about and eHow, for example. Should we be avoiding them as link opportunities for pages? Are they viewed as a bad neighborhood now from a linking perspective?
If they rank, probably not. So I wouldn't worry too much.
Another SEO question. I'm not sure I follow here. I'm going to read this real slowly. A couple times, maybe. Okay. Okay. I hope I'm getting this right. Is writing 20 very similar articles, but still unique on the same subject, but with different titles and with the specific aim of getting the search result, however the user may frame the question, is that spam?
Probably not from the user perspective, because nobody is going to see more than one of them. So the user will not actually get a bad experience. You could hypothetically get a bad experience if you search for multiple long-tail versions of the same phrase, but you're probably only doing that if you're doing SEO research on whatever content farm is creating those 20 articles. So bad user experience for you, everyone else is fine.
Unless the consumer is being pushed a related content bucket that has those extra articles that are basically on the exact same topic.
Okay, and let me see, we have one time for probably one more quick question. And this for anybody. Did paid search have any role in this update based on what you guys have seen?
We've never paid for traffic ever, so I don't know.
Yeah, from what I read, it didn't look like there was any correlations between, hey, you do a lot of paid search and you got spared from this update. I think it was very unrelated to what was going on with paid search from what I've seen. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No impact. No impact.
Okay, so thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.